Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you. Welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Now, well, there's a great deal more that we could say on the Great Tribulation, demonstrating its relationship between the abomination of desolation as sin committed by Israel, and thus the Great Tribulation being a time of covenantal judgment on Israel. Okay, great deal more that we could do. I'm going to conclude our study of the Great Tribulation with today's lesson. Now, let me encourage you to get a copy of my book, very inexpensive book, Blast from the Past, The Truth About Armageddon. Pardon me. I have in this book a tremendous wealth of information that you're not going to find very commonly. I can tell you that. And so go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and order a copy. You just go to the store, click on it, and just do a search, Blast from the Past, and it'll come up. And like I said, very inexpensive book. You will be glad that you order it. And I can tell you, I've had people, and it's a small book, all right, but I've had people tell me this has changed their life. This has just totally changed their life. They no longer fear the future, because guess what, folks? If there is no great tribulation in our future, then there is no man of sin. That's pretty good news, isn't it? Okay. I told you on Monday and on Tuesday, I think, that I was going to prove to you that the Great Tribulation had to do with and was focused on, to a great extent, Israel for violation of her sins. That didn't mean that there wasn't also at the same time the tribulation against the church. Because after all, in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus... Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Well, like I told you yesterday, I had something else planned for today that was going to be actually my last video on the Great Tribulation. I've decided to do something else today. I will put off the last video on the Great Tribulation until next Monday, okay? Today, I want to focus on a very significant reality. Revelation chapter 16 and verse 6. It says that Babylon had shed the blood of the saints and prophets. Now, while it may seem insignificant to us today because we're not in the culture, we're not in that context, we are not in what the German scholars would call the Sitzenleben, the life situation, okay? And so we might have a tendency to kind of gloss right over this reference to prophets. But that would be a mistake on our part. Because you see, in the world of the first century, and previous to that, but in the world of the first century, when reference was made to prophets in the New Testament, all right? I mean, it goes without saying in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, when we find the term either the anarthrous prophets, as it is here, or the term prophet with the definite article, the, all right? When we find that term without some kind of a contextual qualifier that tells us the prophets in consideration here are New Covenant prophets. For instance, in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 28 and following, Paul says God set some in the church. He gave first of all some to be prophets. Ephesians chapter 4, when he ascended up on high, that's Christ, he gave gifts unto men. He gave some to be apostles, some to be prophets. Well, guess what? That qualifier, that contextual qualifier, demands that he's talking about the prophets of Christ. The prophets that Jesus said, Luke chapter 11, 49 and following, behold, I send to you, Jerusalem and Jerusalem, my apostles and my prophets. So these are not, in one sense of the word, these are not Old Covenant prophets. Now, by the way, an argument can be made very strongly, very convincingly, in my personal opinion, that these apostles and prophets of Jesus are the final manifestation, even though they're proclaiming the new covenant. Make no mistake about that. Even though they're proclaiming the new covenant, preaching the new covenant, setting the new covenant in place, they are nonetheless in the process of fulfilling the old covenant, proclaiming the then present, then ongoing, and about to be consummated fulfillment of the old covenant. So on one very real level, it is wrong to create an incredibly sharp line of demarcation between Jesus' apostles and prophets and the Old Covenant prophets. Because, to reiterate, Jesus' prophets were proclaiming the imminent fulfillment of God's Old Covenant with Israel. Acts chapter 3, 21 and following, 2 Peter 3, Acts 24, the list goes on. This is simply undeniable. Now, don't make a mistake, don't misunderstand. Are they New Covenant prophets in a very real sense, very substantive sense? Absolutely. No question about it. But they are proclaiming, as New Covenant prophets, the impending passing away through fulfillment of the old. Now, here's a point that I really, really want to focus on. Anytime that the term prophets or the prophets is used without any kind of a contextual qualifier, in other words, simply prophets, no qualification given, no delineation given, it is invariably a reference to Old Covenant prophets. And look, even when the contextual qualifier points out that it's talking about the Old Covenant prophets, hello, that reinforces the point, solidifies the point that I'm making. Okay, so you have passages in which there is no contextual qualifier. Then you have passages in which the context very clearly and undeniably qualifies or points out and identifies the prophets as Old Covenant prophets. And that is in the absolute preponderant number of cases in the New Testament. Now, in Revelation chapter 16, there is absolutely no contextual qualifier to delineate and to tell us, these are the New Covenant prophets and not Old Covenant. Okay? No textual qualifier. What that indicates to us, therefore, what the consistency of language, therefore, would indicate is these are Old Covenant prophets. You know what that means? Well, it means Babylon was not Rome, because Rome never killed an Old Covenant prophet. Couldn't do it. By the way, not talking about literal Babylon either. You do realize that literal Babylon tried to kill the prophets of God, i.e. Meshach and Abednego. Yeah, they tried to kill Daniel. Didn't work, did it? Couldn't. So, if it is the case that Babylon of Revelation had slain the prophets, and it is the case, and if it is the case that the prophets that Babylon had slain were the Old Covenant prophets, and it is the case, then it must be true that Babylon was not, to state this negatively, was not Rome, was not literal Babylon, the one city that the Bible consistently, persistently, repeatedly, and explicitly identifies as the city that killed the prophets is Old Covenant Jerusalem. So you know what that means is, since the tribulation was coming on the city that killed the prophets, that means the Great Tribulation was coming on Old Covenant Jerusalem for killing the prophets. And by the way, since the tribulation and the resurrection and the coming of the Lord are inextricably bound up together, then that means you can't divide the Olivet Discourse. Because that great tribulation of Matthew chapter 24, in Revelation, what would it lead to? Resurrection, kingdom, salvation, available for anyone and everyone. Don't forget, get a copy of my book, Blast from the Past, The Truth About Armageddon. You'll be glad that you did. Well, thank you so much for joining me on this morning's Morning Musings. Don't forget, next Monday, Lord willing, I'll share with you the very last lesson on the Great Tribulation, and then we'll move on in our study of the Olivet Discourse. But I guarantee you, you don't want to miss it next Monday. You have a fantastic weekend. Please be safe. I'll see you on Monday.